We spent 2 weeks on the road. It was a busman's tour, and you had very little sleep. You'd start at 9 in the morning and finish off at 2 in the morning in a police car chasing stolen vehicles through the streets of London. And then you had to get up in the morning and go and do it all again. Anyway, 10th to the 25th of July 1992, just a quick summary of how I ended up being selected. I was very fortunate. First 20 years of my career I worked for a company called CRA, Consignment Rio Tinto Australia, and I spent many years wandering the bush up in the Kimberleys, 5 years, and looking for diamonds, middle of nowhere, and developed a very good understanding of Maslow's needs hierarchy in communities such as Umbulguri and Kalumburu and Mowanjum and One Arm Point, and working with Mowanjum, the Warman community of Turkey Creek as a result of working up on the Argyle project. And I've continued that right throughout my 40-year career as a geologist, because the community gives us a social licence to operate, whether you be a miner or a farmer or anything like that. If you don't have that social licence, if you don't bring the community with you, then you're bound to failure. Anyway, so I'm going to flick through a few little slides up in here, and this is going to be a bit like speed dating, but all of the things that you've heard in the last few minutes have been covered. I've just got to find the down arrow. So we had the Duke. We had 243 young people from throughout the Commonwealth. The average age was 37 years. An interesting demographic, 173 males and 70 females. I wonder whether today it would be more balanced. We're talking something about 25 years ago, and I think we've come a long way in understanding the role and the contribution that women make in society and industry and all sorts of things. 25 from Australia, 25 from Canada, 112 from Britain, so it's fairly heavily weighted towards those countries, but we had another 20 or 30 Commonwealth countries. 47% industry and business, 8% banking, 12% government, trade unions, education and other. And other included not-for-profit, etc., etc. A diverse group of people, but all these people, like myself, had gone in for an interview with previous alumni, and we'd been grilled fairly heavily about our value system and our views on industry and politics and government, etc. Same sort of process that the others went through. The Duke set us a task, and why do organisations succeed? Why do organisations fail? Why do some communities thrive while others decline? And how can we manage challenge and change in our jobs in the future? And those questions are very relevant today. They are time immemorial, because we're going through a lot of industrialisation, technology changes, demanning. Some people call it downsizing. Study tours, the core of the conference, 16 groups. We were A, B, C, D group, each comprised of about 15 young, intelligent, passionate people on a quest to answer the Dukes. It was like a big competition, and it was a busman's tour. We had everybody had a bus. Each group had a bus. We had a driver, a bus driver. We had a leader, and we had a secretary on the bus. And we stayed in university colleges throughout the area in which we were assigned. We were assigned to. So there's the Where's Wally picture. I've got a prize if anybody can spot me. I've actually brought a little bit of gold, and I've got a birdie prize here. Look, somewhere here. Have to find it later. Can't find it. Somewhere in there, there's a very young Dermot Ryan. So what were we doing? We had a group, Canadians, Australians. Simon Molesworth became a very good friend of mine. Simon's a barrister in Melbourne, highly regarded. In the other groups we had people like Meredith Helliker, who got to know she became the chairman of James Hardie at one stage. We had an action-packed tour from early in the morning. The process was we'd arrive at whether it be IBM or British Gas, British Petroleum, Thames Water, etc., etc. We'd start with the CEO, and he'd give a talk about how their commitment was to safety, and we're going to be the best organisation in the world, etc. And he'd pass us on to the general manager, who'd basically replicate the story. And then we'd head down to the shop floor and start talking to the unionists. and then we'd talk to the people who are actually on the machines making things. And what we were looking for was coherence between what the chief executive was saying and his vision and the people on the shop floor. And what we basically found was that the organisations that were doing very well, that chain was very strong. So the people on the workshop floor had the same vision, the same commitment to the objectives as the people at the top. And what we found was that the organisations that weren't doing so well, the people at the top of the tree had a different view of the world from the people on the bottom of the tree. So we were doing London and the Thames Valley. So 30 visits in 11 days was pretty hectic. And as I said, we used to get back to our college, whichever university we were staying at that night, at sort of 2 or 3 in the morning, having spent a couple of hours in the back of a police car chasing stolen Porsches around the streets of London in a little turbo diesel police car. Houses of Parliament, British Airways, there's the Concorde. We got on the Concorde, but fortunately we didn't fly. And I'm still here to tell the story. So as we went along, I was emailing back, faxing back slides to my cartographer in my drafty in Sydney in the office, and he'd be faxing them back the next morning. So everybody would go to bed at midnight or 2 a.m. and they get up in the morning and you'd have all these slides. And I produced lots and lots of slides along the way, and we were ticking some and changing them. By the time we got back to Oxford, the last day, we just went out and photographed the slides, and we did a 35mm. But it was an interesting exercise. The mission statement for British Airways to be the best and most successful airline business in the world. It sounds pretty trite, but how would you like to get on a Boeing 747 that's just gone in to have its maintenance done in Heathrow, and they wheel these things in, and in about 5 days they take out 50,000 parts, and they tag them, and these workers send some away for repair and some are for replacement, and they put those parts back in and they roll the aircraft out, and then just take it out and put passengers on it and fly all over the world. Now, do you want those people on the shop floor in that workshop to be passionate, dedicated, educated, well paid and loved by management? I certainly do, and that's one of the things we found through walking around this sort of organisation. So you speak to the CEO, then you get down on the shop floor, and it's a very interesting experience. Sometimes we found that we found a dichotomy between people at the top and people at the bottom, and certainly in terms of safety. Often safety, you can have all the platitudes in the world about safety, but at the end of the day, you ask the people on the shop floor whether they actually really work in a safe environment. And certainly in the mining industry, and as Vanessa would say, that's it's absolutely critical. Anything that moves and is big can kill you, and so safety is the #1 priority. So one of the things we were looking at basically was in the profit, quality of life and people, and I think this is something that doesn't go away. How do you balance your professional life and your personal life? And certainly if you're running an organisation, you're out there to make profit, but how do you make that profit? Do you make it in a genuine manner, or are you robbing from the rich to pay yourself? Sorry, there are people who redistribute income, and there are people who actually generate wealth. Went back. Sorry. So we were with the chief probation officer in Berkshire, and we were out with the police one night. And he said that everybody in the community has rights and responsibilities. There's a contract between the individual and society. And I tell that to my children as well. It's not all about their rights. They've actually got responsibilities as well. Quite often I think that people feel that they have lots of rights, but they don't look at the flip side of the coin. And we have a responsibility to the other people our community, and the people we work with. Ron asked me. So the study tour is 16 groups, each comprised of, and really what we came down to at the end of the day, and there were 16, I think there were 16 groups. 15 of those groups came back with the same answer. It was couched in different language, but at the end of the day, everybody converged. Didn't matter whether you were a unionist or a doctor or an educator or a CEO, a captain of industry or a lawyer or what have you. At the end of the day, everybody came to the same conclusion, that really it's all about people. and there was one group that failed. One group came back and they couldn't agree on how they were going to put their workshop or their presentation together, and it was really quite interesting to see the sort of the dynamics that we don't live in a perfect world, and some people are going to fail. Even some high-performing teams will fail. Anyway, so when Ron asked me to come and do this, he said, well, you know, what did I learn from all of this? Well, as I said, I worked for CRA for about 20 years, and in 1992 I did the Duke of Edinburgh Study Conference, and prior to that I'd been wandering around in a helicopter in Australia and Canada and Russia and various other places, and I went from, you know, sampling for diamonds to Oxford, and then in 1993, after I'd come back and done a tour through CRA Exploration, I was appointed to John Ralph's Continuous Improvement Task Force. This continuous improvement was something that John Ralph had continued on from Rod Carnegie, who was an ex-McKinsey specialist, previously the CEO, Managing Director of CRA. And I won't go through it, it's a long and involved process, but basically as a GM I was sent out to a business unit carrying a process, and I had no involvement in the content. Because I was a geologist, I could sit down with engineers or whoever it happened to be, and my role there was the facilitator to bring this process into the organisation. They had to do a very, very thorough audit of their organisation in every aspect of the organisation and produce a continuous improvement plan. And so, you know, these are some of the sort of the snapshots that I took out of that. The greatest source of untapped opportunities in CRA between the ears of its people. And you've got to look after that resource because it is such a precious, precious thing. The other thing that I really took with me is the values continuum. All through my life I've tried to have a strong set of values, and it's generally stood me in great stead. And at the end of the day, I go out and I try and raise money to do mineral exploration, which is a highly risky business. And you sometimes ask the people who front up and put several $1 million into your company and say, well, why did you choose our company out of the 760 listed companies on the stock exchange? And they say, almost invariably, we look at the quality of the people involved and then figure out that those good people will actually find the project. So it's not just the project, it's actually the people behind it. So, this was IBM, and this is really the CRA exploration model, where basically you have a small core of people, and then you have contracts of service and contracts for service, and that's really a very simple model. But the third age is interesting. The first age is learning. The first 20 years of your life, you're really going out there and soaking up as much information and knowledge as you can. Second age is your working family, 21 to 45, where you're actually putting back into society and family. And then the third age, I've got to read that. It says, I can't read it from here, but it's really the really living. It's sort of the getting of wisdom and applying that wisdom back into life. So, where did all of that get me? It got me retrenched, because. And so, you know, I agree with Vanessa, you know, always look on the bright side of life. So in 1995, CRA merged with RTZ to form Rio Tinto, which is the largest mining company in the world. And we had a gentleman come out from the United States and said, God damn you Aussies, we don't need exploration anymore. Thank you very much, you can all go. Because we were spending about $100 million a year, and there was 100 of us. And they thought they could save a bit of money. So smaller is better. And so 1995, 96, I was running big projects, Century Zinc up in Queensland, biggest zinc mine in the world, and we all flew down to Melbourne, and we all got sacked. All the chief geologists got sacked, and then people went out to our various sites. It was a very tough time for a lot of people. You got wives and families living in places like Cobar, Orange, Broken Hill, and somebody from headquarters rolls up and says, oh, we need a conference with you, and thank you very much, goodbye. And fortunately, I'd only had 20 years with the company. But I was working with people who might have been there for 40 years, and I saw people have breakdowns, never work again, totally destroyed by the process of being retrenched. And what I'd say to you people is that at the end of the day, on a big company, you're just a number in a payroll, and remember that. And you need to think about taking control of your own career rather than thinking that your boss is going to look after your career. Very fortunately for me, I jumped on a plane in '96, and really, what did I learn from Oxford? I learned a lot about management and leadership, but I also gained a lot of confidence in that I tested my ideas against people from all over the world who are pretty smart people like Vanessa, you know, you got to... and I thought to myself, well, my ideas aren't that bad after all. And I think I'm down to my last slide. So this is my little bit of a takeaway for the rest of you. And firstly, I'd like to thank Ron and the Mannkal Economic Education Foundation for giving me the opportunity. But what's next to 5 L's of life, and I've carried this throughout my life. To live without health, it's not living at all. So look after your health primarily. Stay safe, stay alive. To learn, for without learning and listening, and I get back to what Vanessa said earlier, it's not all about talking, sometimes it's about listening. And put your listening ears on. To love, for without love, life's pretty lonely and meaningless, you know. And also, to be loved. No man or woman is an island, and we are a social being. And finally, to leave a legacy, because you can't take it with you, and by giving back you can improve other people's lives with your generosity. And I think that typifies what Ron is doing here, and other people that I've been associated with. One of our largest shareholders in Alto Metals sold his business for $71 million at the peak of the boom, and he and his wife sat down and wrote out cheques for $6 million and handed out those cheques to their employees without any requirement to do so. And that was just to say thanks to those 300 employees who'd been with them for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years and 40 years. You know, I ask you, do you know anybody who's given away $6 million because they felt their employees deserved it? Because those people had actually made the business what it was, not just the person at the top, but everybody from the person who prepared the samples in the lab to the person who ran the laboratory. So that's it, all over.